Okay, so next up, Andrew Sales, keeping with Schematron now. So yeah, please take it away.
Thank you. So welcome to the second half of Schematron Hour. There's a TV series that probably should never be made. I'm Andrew Sales. I'm an independent consultant working mostly with publishers. So I'm going to talk today about applying Schematron to word processing documents. And when I say word processing documents, I don't just mean Word. When I say Word, it's because most of my examples work with Word, but I'm also bearing in mind ODF too. So as a bit of background, I mean, we've discussed this previously at this conference, but quite a lot of people use Word to capture XML. Why do they do that? I think there's a big cost issue around that. The skills and the familiarity of Word are they're commonplace. And there's the L word legacy. Workflows and content are around which rely on Word up front. And this one, I hesitate to call it fascinating, but it interests me, the dual approach, where you use Word to actually typeset the document that goes off to print, and then as a secondary step, you derive markup from that, rather than getting all your markup from Word and then going down the print output from that. But in terms of drawbacks, of course, you're working in an unstructured environment, so you don't have all the niceness if you want to generate some good quality output. And the underlying markup is hidden from you, so you're working at one or two removes from where you actually want to get to. Which leads me into the discussion of quality. If you want to generate high quality markup coming from Word, then you probably need two things in place at least. You need consistently applied styles, and it also helps if you have a well-designed template, because you can get some of the way like this, but everything styled in the default style probably isn't going to produce optimal results. Basically, you're going to want to infer structure from named styles. Going back to before OOXML and ODF, a lot of people used macros to check that the correct styles had been applied in the correct order. A lot of people still do this, but afterwards, Schematron is possible since it's all XML behind the scenes. We can use, that's what Schematron's designed for, to validate XML. We can also get some benefits from the output of validating with Schematron, so SVRL, that's an XML format too. And the programmer, the content quality expert can write XPaths or XSLT or XQuery in Schematron rather than bespoke code, so they can use their favorite libraries and what have you. I'll talk about this a bit later, but a measure of abstraction is possible. I will come to that. And since it's all standards-based, including the source markup, OOXML and ODF are also international standards, then why not? We like international standards. Before I jump into my rules, I'll show you a document this is the Word document for the extended abstract for this paper. It's a bit self-referential, but there we go. And I've got some name styles in here, so imagine you're trying to generate some sort of nice markup from this Word document, say docbook XML. So I've got an article head style there, and every paragraph is body text. You can see the style inspector up on the top right. There are some, skipped past them, some character styles in there. They're a bit faint, a bit orange, but that's a bibref, so that's a reference to a bibliographic citation. This paragraph here, you see, it's no, not that one, sorry. This paragraph looks like all the others where my cursor is at the bottom. This one. But it's been styled as normal, so not brilliant. It's not following house style. This heading, it's got a heading 2. I've actually got a style called bib head, which will cue the start of the bibliography, so that's not going to work terribly well either. And these things in purple in boxes are dates in the bibliographic references, and that one isn't in the expected ISO format. So there's some issues there, and we can address several of those by writing Schematron rules. This is not an exhaustive list, and you can do other things, but this is kind of thing that crops up regularly. So these are just some examples. So in each case, I've got a business rule up there at the top in italics in natural language, and some Schematron, a Schematron pattern with the namespaces removed for readability. I'm highlighting the context and the test, the assertion in yellow. So here, I'm just asserting that all the styles effectively in the body of the document come from an expected list of, this is not a very ambitious style sheet, I've only got 4 styles. So that testing for unexpected styles is a common check. Again, if you want to infer structure from how the styles are ordered, this hones in on my missing bibliography heading. So here I'm looking back to see if there's any, I'm looking at the first bibliographic entry and looking for a preceding bib head. We can also do data type checking, of course. I'm looking at my bib dates in the bibliography, and I want to make sure that they are conforming to the ISO format. And I'm calling this co-occurrence constraints. They're not really technical. I suppose they're truly speaking that it's an integrity check. I want to say that when I have a number that references something in the a reference to a bibliographic entry, basically. But since we're working in an unstructured environment, it's really a co-occurrence constraint, because if there's one of those, we want to have one of those as well. So there is no linking. There will be when we get to XML. And since we're working in Word, it's a visual environment, so it's useful to be able to give the problems that are found in a document like this, or in the one I showed you, and to present the errors in place, so that an editor or an author can step through them and try and address them. So this is a sort of processing workflow for visualizing the errors. So starting up in the top left-hand corner, in comes our WordPress XML document. We apply some Schematron to it. We get an SBRL report out in the usual way. Then, using XSLT to extract the XPath locations from the SBRL, we generate some more XSLT in the middle at the bottom there. And that is an identity transform which inserts word comments around the problem areas. And the result, if we apply that to the original, then we get an annotated analog of the original document. Yes. So here are my Schematron rules. Here's my the report that comes out. So I've got some locations that I can home in on, some XPaths. Oops, they're very long because they've got lots of nice Microsoft namespaces. This is the style sheet that generates the style sheet that inserts the comments. So I'm matching on all the errors that Schematron finds. And then I'm aware that there are more elegant and efficient ways to do this, but for every error in the document, I generate a key, and these keys come out, whoops, looking like this. So basically, I can index every faulty node, as it were, in the document, and that comes in handy. I said it wasn't very efficient. The word commenting style doesn't help either. But basically, let's see. So the approach is similar for paragraphs and runs. So that is for a paragraph, a run represents an inline style. So for a paragraph style, I output the paragraph, I put a comment around it. That's quite hard to see, but let's see if it works. Get a bit smaller. And the errors are quite far down, so okay. So there we have, there was a rule in there which I didn't show you, but it looks for anything in square brackets that doesn't have the bibref style applied to it. So it's found that. And the text in the comment is the text that you write in the Schematron rule, of course. There's our paragraph style that it's saying that style has the empty string because that's the name that it has in Word for the style that we see as normal. There's our missing heading 2. It's saying no bibliography heading was found, and also that heading 2 wasn't one of the styles that you wanted applied. So there was, because the 3 earlier in square brackets in the text was not styled properly, there's no reference to this third entry, and last of all, this date is in the wrong format. Let's try it with ODF as well. So I put the same document into LibreOffice. And so inspired was I last night by what I'd seen yesterday that I went home and got it to work for ODF as well. So, and if you're going to do it, I'd say do it with ODF because it's a lot easier to work with. So if I skip back to the presentation. So a limitation, of course, is that presenting the errors in that way is they're limited to a renderable location. So if you're looking for something that's missing from the file completely, then you have to hang the error off something, and the usual approach is, the one I use is just to stick it on the first visible thing in the file. So you might, in that case, it might be the article title. But if you've worked with word processing ML, you know it's very verbose and quite difficult to work with. And this means that, well, its flat structure as well also means that rule writing in Schematron becomes tedious quite quickly and therefore error prone and hard to maintain. So I think there's some options for simplifying what you do there. We can simplify the way we write the rules. We can simplify the markup coming in, so the source documents, or potentially there is scope to maybe apply a domain-specific language. So simplifying the rules, I'm not going to rehearse Schematron abstract rules. I think they're a fairly well-known quantity, hopefully. But it's surprising how many rules you end up unabstracted if you go down this route. And you can, the yellow one down there at the bottom is the concrete expression of the abstract rule above. You will do a lot of this kind of checking that on the preceding or following axes, I had this or that style before me or after me. So this is a very powerful way to reduce your rule set, make it more reusable. Simplifying the source, I got so fed up looking at word processing ML, have I said that already, that I wrote a style sheet just to simplify it. So it's just a document with sections and paragraphs. And in those paragraphs are spans and sometimes things like italics and URLs. So it's very HTML-like. So that's what I've highlighted there in yellow, just a snippet. Again, it's the extended abstract, but it's a lot cleaner, it's a lot easier to work with. It means your XPaths are a lot more concise. But we're still writing rules for something that's essentially a document. Wouldn't it be a better fit to have something that's more declarative and schema-like for this? So there has been some work done in this area, which I'll show you in a minute, but I think it's possible that also that you could use a language like this, a schema language, to auto-generate, in the way that Tony was talking about, your schematron rules and apply them to documents in the way that I've shown. So there is another XML consultant called Francis Cave, and he has kindly shown me his work. He issues the disclaimer that he's made no effort whatsoever to check whether someone else has done anything in this space, because he's using it for his own specific purposes, but he's happy to have it shown. He has written a relaxing schema for a schema language. So we have a schema for a schema, meta-programming maybe. And this is a cut-down version, but it's easier to show on one slide. This would be, again, it's very simplistic, I suppose, example, but this would be the the schema for my extended abstract. So it's an article head mandatory at the top, one or more body text styles, and then an optional group of one bib head followed by one or more bibs. But it's possible, he has shown, to get very complicated very quickly. This is, I forget exactly what the document's called, but it's something used by the UK Parliament, I think the House of Commons. And it's pretty hefty. It's basically lots of these documents are laid out in Word overnight, and they go off to be printed for the next day, and the markup is extracted from the Word ML, and that gets published on the web. Oops. But it's the simple checks you can do quite soon. I mean, checking that all the styles in the document are expected, that's a fairly trivial one to implement, I think, because you can just ripple through all the style names. It's the grouping and the optionality and whatnot that make it interesting. We have a broader family of documents beyond word processing ones, and quite often the example of spreadsheets springs to mind, because people tend to put information in those which doesn't have a direct relation to accountancy or numbers, and they use them like primitive databases. So it seems like they quite often need some kind of validation that maybe Excel or Calc or whatever can't provide. So I've put together this one, a spreadsheet example. So I've taken a bit of, or all of, or some of yesterday's speakers, And there are some issues here. I mean, George's affiliation hasn't been copied over properly. We've still got a placeholder for the speaker name in sponsor. Nick, although I know he prefers it this way, his first name is not capitalised. And the start times there collide, so this document has issues. By the way, I'm just running, when I do this, I've just got Ant scripts to chain together the various processes. And if I do this. So it's the same principle. It's a different model in spreadsheet ML. It's actually a little bit cleaner because you can just put HTML inside the comment element. But so I've flagged up, you know, we should have at least one name for a sponsor. There's empty cells in this row. Unfortunately, you have to put a comment inside a cell, and you can't have more than one comment per cell. So that message has gone there. No capital N for Nick, sadly, and if I scroll over, not that far, a bit further, it's telling me that those time slots collide. And Excel, for some reason, thinks that this conference is taking place on New Year's Eve 1899. So I think I'm running a little bit short, but in conclusion, you can do some quality control through Schematron, even though the XML is hidden from you. The errors can be presented in context to the user so that they can work in a familiar environment. There are various strategies for simplifying that work. I think the rules, the source document. There's the possibility of applying a schema-like language to these things. And lastly, it's not just applicable to word processing things. There's other possibilities too. Maybe even for PowerPoint slides. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any questions?
So this feedback loop back to Word is very, very good. What's the easiest way to run it currently? You have to unzip the Word package, right?
Yes, I didn't mention this. This was all Word 2003, so I didn't have those problems. But yes, you would unzip and then.
Yeah, but have you looked at maybe trying to have like a little toolbar button or something like that?
I have integrated it into a template before with a bit of VBA. For the ODF demo, I didn't do the unzipping, but I did the putting back in the zip. So.
Any more questions?
Going back to oxygen use there, oxygen have implemented quick fixes. So some of this is things which are automatically fixable. You've thought about adding to that sort of functionality?
Definitely. And the first time I did this, it was for a journals publisher in 2004, and it was using all XSLT, and there was no Schematron involvement. So the validation was done using XSLT, and for simple problems like extraneous whitespace, they were quite happy to have an XSL transform run over their content. So yes, SQF is great.
No more questions? Okay, thank you, Andrew.